Eric Bolling, thanks for joining the Daily Signal. You're a man of many talents. You're a former baseball player, commodities trader, TV host. In many ways, you're an example of the American dream. Tell our listeners what drives you.
I think that's it. I came from a very, very lower class, not even lower middle. It was lower class, humble beginnings in Chicago, in the city, and it was tough. I remember, I remember a day where my mom, couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. We went to a place called Valueville in Chicago, which is like a little mini department store, kind of Kmart before Kmart. And she's like, let's go get some sneakers. And I went and I got Pro Keds, and I'll never forget the look on her face when she told me we couldn't afford the Pro Keds. And that was like my first exposure to, wow, the classes, like we didn't have what other people had, because all my friends had Pro Keds. And I think that was really the beginning of just a drive to want to succeed. And it's kind of stayed with me from that day forward. So I just it went from baseball, which I would never have been able to afford college if it wasn't for baseball to trade, my trading career, and then now into TV. So and then I wrote a couple of books on the way. So it's a drive that started very young. That's what motivates me to continue.
Eric, you launched your show on CRTV on July 4th of this year. It's called America. Tell us how it's going in the past few months.
By the way, we launched it on the rooftop at Heritage.
That's right.
And it's been amazing. So we're 4 months and a week into it, and it's just doing great. I mean, just the people are loving it. What we do is, it's almost like the Parts Unknown, that Anthony Bourdain type show for politics in D.C. So we're going into congressmen and women and senators' offices. We'll go and just talk to them about the topics of the day. We'll go on the Supreme Court when Kavanaugh. I would spend time in the middle of all the protests. So I go around D.C. with whatever the topic of the day is and just talk to people about what's happening. And also mixing in Trump administration officials to get their side of the story. It's really been kind of fascinating to see. And it's a new education for me too, because it's a digital show, and it's completely, you program it completely differently than you do with a cable news show. In cable news, you have your captive audience. They pay for cable, and all you're trying to do is get someone from another channel to come over and watch your show. In digital, you literally have to get out there and show something different, new, and show value to get people to subscribe and come sign on to the show. So it's a new world, but it's a lot of fun.
And how do they subscribe if they want to
Well, it's crtv.com/Eric. Thank you.
Excellent.
Good job. We're friends forever now.
Eric, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that if Democrats take control back of the House, they're going to pursue campaign finance reform, gun background checks, protect dreamers, essentially restrictions on the First and Second Amendment, and amnesty. Is this what the American people really want?
I don't know what the American people really want. I know conservative Americans don't want that, but boy, you hear her. I read those comments. I mean, it's literally almost, this whole socialism narrative is exploding, and as I said in the remarks earlier, inside, what happened in the last 10 years? Where 15 years when I first came into the media, socialism was a bad word. It was awful. I mean, I remember saying Obama's a socialist, and I got called to the office saying, "Be careful, be careful what you say. That's pretty rough language." Now, Democrats are running as Democrat socialists. I don't know how we've made such a fast move. Maybe people just like free stuff, and they're not concerned. They don't. And it's possible that we've spent 10 or 15 or 20 years with decent or pretty good economies where younger people are saying, well, how bad could it possibly be? It could never have been as bad as it was. Meanwhile, I lived through the first crash in 1989. I lived through the 2005 financial crisis that almost wiped us out completely, the global financial market. So I see where younger people are saying, hey, maybe this is the place to go. I can get free stuff. But I think there's an opportunity to kind of show them that it's not always going to be this way. There are risks to giving away everything. And one day you're going to have to pay taxes and pay for all that stuff anyway. So someone's going to have to pay. So there's an opportunity to pick up Republican, conservative young people.
Well, I'm glad you raised that issue. We talked to Betsy DeVos here at the Daily Signal and asked her why it is, as an education secretary, what she's observing, why young people are gravitating towards socialism. She said it's because they're really not getting that basic foundational education about civics and government, K-12, and then when they go to college,
Yeah, there you go.
They're not able to debate with these professors who are obviously coming from a socialist perspective. Are there other factors that you've seen in your own work as to why both young people and Democrats are moving in this direction?
I don't know if they totally are. I think on the coast they are, and I think they tend to be the more high-profile candidates and or elected officials. I think the general, like it said, when you travel the middle part of the country, even the South, the West, Central, it's not like that. It's still center right, and they're still pro-Trump, and they're still generally conservative. It's just that there are pockets of populations on the coast that lean far left. They're just liberals / socialists that they're looking for it. So I just talked to a gentleman inside. I said, Oklahoma, the reddest state in the union. I said, well, yeah, there's a lot of red states. He said, well, we were the only state that had not one county that voted for Hillary Clinton. They're all Trump voters. They all went Trump. So when you look at Middle America, if you look at that county map where the red versus blue in the counties, it's crazy. It's like 90% of the counties, or 80-something% of counties voted pro-Trump, voted Trump, not Hillary. So, look, the system is set up that it's population driven. I get it, but that's what happens is the media centers are on the East Coast and the West Coast, and those are the ones that are getting the most attention. They're all liberal.
From your recent travels, from your show, which issues would you say are conservatives most fired up about right now?
The base conservatives, the wall. I mean, I'll go to events. It's the wall. I honestly think they're not fired up enough about the midterm elections. I think they are more fired up than they would have been if Brett Kavanaugh didn't get seated. So that I think they'll show up. Like I said inside, I think the Senate may pick up 1 or 2 Senate seats, which, contrary to what the liberal media will tell you, that they're going to go. It's going to be Democrats picking up seats. I doubt it. I think it's Republicans. But I also think the Republicans hold the House too. And but there needs to be a little bit more energy. Let's get out there.
Well, certainly the economy is doing very well, and that could fuel some people who like the Trump administration's policies. What do you attribute the success to that we've seen in the last 2 years?
I got to tell you, the first thing Trump did when he got into office, I think he was sworn in on a Saturday, maybe by Sunday or Friday or Saturday. I can't remember what day it was.
Yeah.
And then by the weekend, he was already rolling back regulation. I'm literally starting to roll back regulation after regulation. That frees up the business community. I can't emphasize enough how businesses, boardrooms, and I've been on the board of directors of the New York Mercantile Exchange, spent 5 years on there, and you have a business outlook going forward, a year, a 5-year, and a 10-year plan. And when the environment is so regulatory overblown, strangling your business, you don't plan too far ahead. You don't hire as many people as you look to hire, or spend money on your own business. But when those regulations come down, where you're feeling a little bit better about being able to expand into a new area of business, or you spend more money on research and development, on capital investment in your own company, and then finally hiring, and that all works its way into the system on unemployment. When people are employed, they spend more. That's just the way it is. So if the economy that unemployment's falling, it's more spending, and what that does is it raises GDP. So like I said earlier, when was the last time we had GDP exceeding the unemployment rate by this much and for this long? Let's not forget, 3 years ago, Obama said 1.5% GDP was going to be the new norm. The new norm. Now we're in excess of 4%, in excess of 3% for several quarters. It wasn't the new norm. It was just him explaining why he was 1.5% for 8 years.
You mentioned Brett Kavanaugh earlier, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think the lasting impact of that entire ordeal will be?
A Supreme Court that's conservative for 30 years, 20, 30 years plus, and I think the Kavanaugh issue becomes boring. I mean, the liberals will look for the next thing to complain about. If you remember, it was Russia collusion. All of a sudden, Kavanaugh get everyone's attention. And then that went away. So it's pretty soon it's going to be back to Russian collusion. They'll forget about Kavanaugh until the first major, line in the sand, conservative, liberal decision at the Supreme Court, and then they'll say, oh, it should be thrown out because of what what's going on, the nonsense that's going on over the last couple of months.
Eric, Gallup has a new poll out. It shows trust in media among Republicans is just 21%. Contrast that with Democrats, where it's 76% of Democrats trust the media. What does this tell us about the state of our media in this country?
It tells you that Trump is right, that the media is wildly biased on the towards the left, on the left, and against Donald Trump. I mean, there's no question about it. You saw this Harvard studies about how much negative attention, negative stories about Trump versus positive is like 80%. And how many people in media donate to Democrat causes versus Republicans is 80, 90%. So the media clearly is left. Of course, Republicans aren't going to trust them. They're generally they're liberal. There are very, very few conservatives and probably fewer fair down the middle media types. Even the news people who are supposed to be straight down the middle aren't. They pick a side. But generally the sway is that far.
I wanted to ask you next, what do you think has happened to the Never Trump Republicans? President Trump has had so many wins. Do you think any of them have been swayed at all?
I think the Never Trumpers are on a slow path to destruction. So when Trump came in, I thought the Never Trumpers were more dangerous than the liberals. You knew where the left was on Trump, but the Never Trump crew was undermining and awful. When you had a Republican taking shots and undermining the Trump agenda, it was awful, terrible. And so I talked about, for example, John McCain, Jeff Flake, and Lindsey Graham, Ben Sasse, among others, were probably four of the most vocal Never Trumper Republican senators. I talked about running against Lindsey Graham. I bought a house in South Carolina to primary Lindsey Graham. And I was going to do it up until its Kavanaugh hearings. He found his voice. Now, did he find his voice after McCain passed? Perhaps. Maybe he just didn't have it in him to have that voice when John McCain, his very, very good friend, was here to keep an eye on him. But I think slowly, and I saw Ben Sasse this morning on MSNBC, and he was kind of even almost pro-Trump. Not quite pro-Trump, but not taking shots at the president anymore. These are people who are really detrimental, hurtful to the president and his candidate, his presidency, and his agenda, and now seem to be realizing that, hey, how do you argue with 4+% GDP and under 4% unemployment? You don't go back to your districts or your states and try and run against that. It's political suicide. So I think the Never Trump portion of the swamp is draining itself.
Ginny mentioned earlier your many talents. Is politician in the future then?
It was very close. Like if like I said, I'm very serious. I bought the house with the express purpose of running in 2020, primarying Lindsey Graham, until he was so vocal and so influential in making sure Brett Kavanaugh got seated. That was during the campaign for presidency, I would continually implore people, conservatives, to vote for Trump, who couldn't stand him. Just vote for him because you needed a conservative Supreme Court. It will outlast the Trump legacy by decades. And that was really, the Supreme Court was the most important thing for me. Trump's my friend. I thought he would be a good businessman, and I thought the economy would do well. But for me, the most important reason to vote for Trump was the Supreme Court. He was the only one who was going to beat Hillary, and we needed conservatives on the Supreme Court. So when Lindsey Graham stepped up and put it out there, put it all on the line, I was like, maybe I won't. But he is not the most loved senator in the union. I mean, you travel South Carolina, they don't really love him that much. I think he re-earned his political, his conservative credentials in the Kavanaugh hearing. So I decided to let's do something else.
Congress recently passed a bipartisan opioids bill, and I know it's an issue that's very close to your heart following your son's death. Do you think that we're making progress on this issue?
We are. Not enough, but we are. So I think we've made a lot of progress, and I think Trump wants to do a lot of interesting things on the enforcement side. With the drug dealers, closing the border to illegal drugs coming across, doing some. Kirsten Nielsen at Homeland Security is doing some things with the Postal Service to catch opioids as they come and other drugs as they come. So the enforcement side is doing real well. I'm very vocal about saying the administration needs some help on the awareness side. So young people need to realize how dangerous drugs are. My son passed from an accidental overdose of there was illegal fentanyl in a Xanax tablet that he bought on campus. So I think young people need to understand how dangerous they are, and we need more of that. We need more, PSAs on television. We need more people talking about it. And parents need to understand that it's a conversation you have to have. And really, we need to remove the stigma of opioids. Like, people think heroin, and they think, needles in veins in dark alleys. It's not that anymore. It's literally tablets on the street that are $5 or $10 that high schoolers are buying to get high instead of, it's cheaper than marijuana or cocaine, and some of it's bad. Some of it's deadly. I mean, 74,000 people died last year, and the number's going up, not down. So there needs to be more enforcement, but much more awareness.
We appreciate the work that you're doing to help raise some of that awareness. I know you've appeared in some of those White House videos to help raise awareness about the issue. So thank you, Eric. We truly do appreciate that.
It's not easy. It's not these questions are hard, but they need to be spoken about, need to be answered. So we'll continue that path as well.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us again at the Daily
Ginny,
Signal.
thank you guys. Thank you guys both so much. Appreciate it.